Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, March 15th, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week we get home brewing tips from another professional brewer. This time it's Stephen Pauwels of Boulevard Brewing Company in Kansas City, Missouri. Stephen shares with us some of the techniques he's using to create a new line of adventurous beers that will come from Boulevard in the near future. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm recording this episode about a week in advance. About the time I usually produce this podcast, I'll be heading back from attending South by Southwest in Austin. I've been attending the interactive media section of South by Southwest for the past few years. I get to hear different viewpoints from other media producers, and I get to stay with my buddy Kelly, whose name you hear at the end of every podcast. So hopefully I will have learned a bunch of stuff and had some fun as well. I intend to get together with our other buddy in Austin, Chris Colby from Brew Your Own magazine. So I promised him that I would leave the mics at home and we could just have a beer and talk about, we could even talk about something other than beer. You never know. 2 years ago, down at South by Southwest, I met one of my heroes, Elvis Costello, while I was down there. And this past year, I met Amanda Congdon, formerly of Rocket Boom, now of ABC News, I guess. I wonder if I'll get to meet anybody interesting this year. You never know. All that to say that I'm not going to read email this week. I hope that I've been getting input while I'm gone on the batch sparging versus fly sparging debate. Also, I hope that I've been receiving more input on what brewing software you've been using and what you think of it. So think of those things. If you haven't emailed me, do so. And I would appreciate it greatly. Be sure to send your notes to james@basicbrewing.com or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check your email address. Okay, it's a short intro this week. Thankfully so, probably. Let's get to it. First, I want to thank Ben Brown and Julie Weeks of Boulevard for helping to arrange our visit and video tour of the brewery that you'll see on Basic Brewing Video here in the within the next couple months. Boulevard's recently expanded and added a beautiful new brew house that is among the most technically advanced in the country. They're using their new capacity to add some interesting beers. Well, Stephen Pauwels, the brewer, took time to talk to us, even though he was sick and couldn't join us in tasting the wonderful beers. Well, Stephen Pauwels, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
All right, thank you for having me.
And you're a little under the weather, and we're all drinking nice beers, and you're only drinking water. I feel kind of bad. Not much bad, but a little bad.
Well, don't worry, my time will come. I'll catch up.
And you are the head brewer here at Boulevard, right?
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
And we have a peanut gallery today. We're joined by members of Fayetteville Lovers of Pure Suds. And you guys introduce yourselves around the table.
Hello, I'm Mike Lennox.
My name is Tom Ford.
Ashley Goodwin.
Mark Smith.
And if you're a fan of Basic Brewing Video, you've seen Mark's house, seen his brewing setup. Give us a little background on yourself, Stephen. How long have you been brewing? And you said you were a home brewer before you became a professional brewer, and you're Belgian. So you may have an interesting story there. Tell us.
Well, the home brewing started when I went to college. I went to college for let's back up. And when I was 16, and I did some summer interns here and there, and one of the interns was where my dad worked, in the brewery, the local brewery in the small town where I grew up. And I always liked the guy with the white lab coat on because I thought he had a fun job. He ran around, yelled at people, drank beer all day. I thought, well, that's kind of my job. So that's what I want to do. So when I went back after that summer, I studied fermentation technology, biochemical engineering, as they call it in Belgium. And then while I was going to school to do that, I thought, well, I might as well start brewing at home. And so I did. And it was terrible.
So how was it terrible?
Well, I think the first one did okay, but I think you don't have a yeast source. There was no dry yeast available at that time, so you had to go to a brewery that had yeast, and so they give you the leftovers of the leftovers, and that bucket in the corner, and that was that it was never came out good. Let's say I was pretty good at making some kind of lambic.
I was going to say, doesn't good yeast just blow in the breeze in Belgium?
Yeah, if you have plenty of time, yeah, that's true. Yeah. But anyhow, after that, I continued with the brewing, and then from then on, I started working. That brewery actually was owned by InBev, and is right now a nice mall because they took the brewery down, unfortunately. And that kind of was my master plan. Was okay, I'm gonna go to school. That guy was getting old, the brewmaster over there. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna take his spot and be the local hero, the local brewmaster. But InBev didn't think about it that way, so they closed the brewery, and I had to look for another job. And then I ended up in a brew pub, where I worked for about 6 years. Then I did bottling for about bottling manager at Riva that makes Liefmans for about a year. And then I came over here to the U.S. to work with Boulevard.
And how long ago was that?
It's almost 8 years ago. I interviewed and at the weekend there was Super Bowl. And they were very, very nervous about that. They thought I would never want to come back. But I did.
Now, you are Belgian, and you said that you have heard the interview with Peter Broekhaert on our show, in which he says that he doesn't make styles of beer, he makes art, and he makes 10 minutes of pleasure, and he says that that's kind of the Belgian way of thinking. And you come into a company that makes good beer, but they are fairly strictly categorized into existing styles. Was that a clash of philosophy for you to come into an environment like that?
No, not really, because the beers are good. And I think in the end, that's what counts. The plan, or what the brewer does, is he has ideas in his head of, okay, this is the kind of beer that I want to make. And that's where you want to go. That's what your goal is. It's what you want to get to. What the BA has done over the years, trying to get everything categorized, is helping people to get making decent beer. That doesn't mean I agree with styles. I think right now we're at the point where styles are just limiting the capabilities of a brewer. When I talk to homebrewers, I keep telling the same thing over and over again. You guys are lucky. You got a small system. You can do whatever you want. Stop trying to copy my beer, because it doesn't make any sense. You can do whatever you want, and it doesn't make any sense at all. And so in the years we've tweaked beers, of course. We tweaked our beer so much that when we go to the GABF, we never win a medal. Like our pale ale is too mellow, it's too drinkable, and I've never had a beer that's too drinkable. But that's what comes out of the GABF for us. So, I mean, in the end, that's what I want to make, is drinkable beers, good beers, but drinkable. And I think that's everything that a customer wants.
So when I announced on my show that I was coming up here to tour the brewery, I got an email from someone who's been trying to clone your unfiltered wheat, and he had a list of questions. Ask him about the water, ask him about the hops, ask him about. So, would your advice to that home brewer who's trying to copy your beer, what would your advice be?
I'll send him all the ingredients that he wants to. I don't care. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, that's fine. But open your mind and make something yourself. That's what my advice is. And I'll be happy to give him everything that he wants to know, but why? I mean, why would you try to make something that's decent in a store that you can buy? And you can make it better if you want to. And then give me a call if you make it better, because I want to know how he makes it better.
That's a good point. So tell us what the beer that we're tasting right now.
This is a Saison with bread. I've always been a big fan of Saisons because they are, go back about 10 years ago, nobody knew about them. They were dying. There was nobody really making them anymore, even in Belgium. And then there's a hype coming basically from the U.S. because smaller brewers and home brewers and craft brewers were they liked the style. And that basically went back to Belgium, and now every brewery you go to has a saison. Probably because, and you go back to style, because there is no style. They're all over the board. They're amber to light to color, and they're bitter to sweet, and they're all over. So you can, any kind of beer you want to make, call it a saison, and it'll happen. But I like the reason why they made saison is because they had to last through the summer, so they were hoppy, they were bitter, and they were drinkable because they were drinking them in summertime. And that's what I like about a saison. That's what I would call the style for a saison. And this is our version. And then, we like a bit of funk now and then in our beer. So we put Brettanomyces in it, and then that's what comes out of it.
So is this something that's destined for production, or is this just you having fun around the brewery?
Well, John Bryan is here also in the room, and John Bryan and I like this beer so much we're not going to sell it. I think it's too good.
And John is in sales. Say hi, John.
Hi.
And Craig is here as well. Introduce yourself, Craig.
I'm Craig Bijanowski, the lead brewer. Work under Stephen.
And this is Craig's first brewing job. And he has. You were telling us you have a degree in food science, and just kind of accidentally stumbled into this job, and that was about 5 years ago. Did you say?
Almost 5 years ago, yeah.
So, and you're saying it's a pretty good place to work.
Oh yeah, I'll never go back to what I was doing before. I don't think I ever want to have a real job again.
So let's talk about this style. We are thirsting for not only good beer, but for good knowledge as well as homebrewers. So talk to us about this beer and what went into making it, and if we're going to try to brew something like this at home, what should we keep in mind, and what tips do you have for us?
Tip number one would be make it drinkable. I'm probably repeating myself here 15 times, but John and I were drinking IPAs the other day, double IPAs, and it struck me that a lot of beers are getting more sweet again. And it probably was one of the pitfalls that the craft brewers went down in the mid-'90s, because beers were so sweet that people could only drink one. And we like sweet beers. I like a sweet beer now and then for a session beer, one beer. But you know what? We're just just a couple of guys here on the table, but what about those 95 other % that sits at the bar and is used to drinking Bud Light? They don't want sweet beer. So get back to I think this beer needs to be dry. And the second thing is, when you want to make a beer, when you want to put Brettanomyces in, you got to have a dry beer. If there are some beers out there that are sweet and have Brettanomyces, try them and give me a call what you think about them, because I cannot drink them. There's something wrong about the balance. There's something wrong about how tastes evolve and how tastes run through each other with sweetness. So dry beer, first of all, make it dry. Then second, put the bread in, and also look at what hop you like. Put a nice hop in there that you're kind of thrilled with. This one has a nice citrusy flavor from Amarillo hop, kind of a hop that I like. But you probably can get there with Simcoe or even with Magnum probably, or a noble hop, maybe a nice German hop. You would get there also, I think.
Now, if the beer doesn't the Brett tend to dry the beer out as well?
Yeah, that's true. So if you start with a sweet beer, you'll end up with bombs. They'll explode in your cellar pretty fast. So that's one of the other reasons why you have to start with a very dry beer. Yeah, actually, I was in Belgium over Christmas. I went to see a friend of mine, Mark Limet from Kerkom, and he made a beer where it's called Reus. It's a mixture of blonde, like a regular blonde beer. Let's say it's a saison, and he adds 50% of a lambic. So his beer was too sweet, and they're all exploding. All his balls were exploding. So when you do these things, and that's because of the bread, because it just keeps going. So minimize the amount of bread that you use, and then give it time. It's a lot better to add small, wait, than add big, and be happy after a week, because you won't be happy very long.
And at what point do you add the bread?
At bottling. At the bottling point, yeah. Yeah, You know how much we like bread? We don't want it in our brewery, of course. We're making wheat beer for a living. 12 IBUs wheat beer. We don't want bread in our wheat beer. So we're trying to keep it away as far as possible. Yeah.
And what was your primary yeast strain?
That's a yeast strain that we use for a lot of different beers, like Lunar, new beer that we're making. We're making a triple with that beer and some other beers.
And Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about what the main grain bill would be on this particular saison.
Well, if you want to make a beer dry, what are you going to do? Are you going to brew it 100% malt? Are you going to put some sugar in? Maybe even some corn. There you go.
You ask a question, you get a question. Mike, you must look within yourself for the answer.
Is that okay?
Yes,
yeah,
it's
okay.
absolutely great.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So there may be some adjuncts in here.
Yes. Yep. There's nothing wrong with adjunct. I don't think there is. I mean, it's not. I know that again, the craft brewers in the mid '90s, it was all malt. I think we still have T-shirts with all malt brewery. Well, we're adding a bunch of wheat in a wheat beer. That doesn't mean that we're all malt. But it was a reaction to the high adjunct beers. But adjunct in beer is good.
Done properly.
Done. Yes. Yeah, this is 70% corn in here.
Now you mentioned your Lunar Ale. Now this is another beer that doesn't fit within those pigeonholes. It doesn't fit within the style. Are you infecting, like the bread has infected this beer? Are you infecting the culture of Boulevard?
Maybe. I'm not. Am I? Well, I think you have to sometimes kind of look outside of those boundaries and do some cross contamination, if you want to call it. There's a wise man, an old brewer, and you know him because he had a brewery in Texas. And he told me years ago, and he said, well, the key to a beer is, he said, if the beer flows over the glass and you pick it, and he says your hands are sticky, then something's wrong with it. It's the flavor has to be coming from the aromas from yeast or even spices or whatever you want to do, but don't have the aromas coming from sugar. So basically that's what we're trying to do is you make a very drinkable beer, but you still want to give it a lot of flavor. And that's what we try to do with this. How are you going to get to flavor? Well, you got yeast, you got spices, you got hop. That's about it, I think. So those are the ones, and the malt, different malt. So you play with those to get to something flavorful, but drinkable.
Describe the Lunar Ale.
Officially, it's a brown ale.
Unfiltered brown ale.
Unfiltered brown ale, there you go. It's an unfiltered brown ale. We make unfiltered wheat beer, and we kind of like beers unfiltered because they tend to keep more flavor that way. But, we use the yeast that gives a lot more flavor than a regular brown ale. Actually, we're just trying 6 different brown ales and comparing them right before I came here. And there's some good ones out there. There's some from some small breweries. I'm not going to call their names, but look, and there's some neat, I don't know if they call them brown ales, but they're out there. They're not the regular English brown ale anymore. And that's what I like about this category, if you call it a category. It would be the last beer on tap I would drink would be brown ale because to me they're boring to death. So shake it up, make it fun, and put something in there to make it a little bit more pleasant.
It's a wheaty beer. It's got some of the banana characteristics. It's got some spicy characteristics as well that makes me think of Belgianness. Can you elaborate on the ingredients a little more, or can you give us more of a background on what this beer really is?
Wow. Yeah, I can.
I mean, I don't want you to give away trade secrets, but...
No, I don't have any trade secrets. Really, the yeast that we use, like I said, we used it for all over the place for other beers. It's kind of like our house strain that we use for Belgian beers. I don't know the numbers from home brewers, but, look at a good, solid strain. I don't know the numbers. I can't help you with that. But it's a yeast strain that we selected, and I don't know the number, but the one that we use here also. I would give them to you if I knew. But then a lot of what I wanted to get to is get to give it a nice brown color without the roast. And then so I looked at a roast malt that doesn't have the bitterness or the astringency, and I used a Carafa 2 from Weyermann in that to get there. And that's about all there is to it. Really, it's a look for, and the key is, of course, is yeast. I don't know if this beer is ever going to be a success. I hope it is, because it's kind of off the beaten path. So it's not like something we're getting into that we know is going to be, oh yeah, this is going to be it. But on the other hand, sometimes you got to take a little risk to get somewhere. And I know that some people don't like the flavor, the aroma of it, because it's too Belgian. And to go back to the history of it, initially we brewed this beer and we put 2 different yeast strains on it, our house strain and a different Belgian yeast strain, the yeast strain that we use for Zone, which makes a lot of clove. And so we put that on tap in our tasting room, had people on tours taste the beer, and give them a quote on what they liked. That was our little customer or consumer investigation, or how you call it. And then, excuse me, what came out of that, 75% liked the one with our house strain, which was basically our wheat beer with color. And I really didn't want to go there. So that's what we ended up with this.
So you're kind of not exactly going to where the customer leads you, but you're kind of leading them a little bit.
I think isn't it our job to do some education also? I think so. So that's my little part of education education in beer drinking, or in beer making, I guess. And that's my little help for beer education.
As we've talked about on the show, it's not just the yeast strain that you use; it's how you treat the yeast that brings out certain flavors. What was your scheme for fermentation temperatures to get some of those nice fruity flavors in there?
Well, this yeast strain that we use in here does not like high temperatures. And that's, if I go to homebrew competitions, sometimes I get just smacked in the face by fusel alcohols. You can go wild with some strains. I know the regular, or the Saison strain that everybody uses from, what those guys' name again in Belgium? Sorry. The Saison Dupont, yeah, the Dupont strain is what everybody uses, and it likes high temperatures, and it won't make a lot of fusel alcohols. Well, this strain doesn't. It makes tons of fusel alcohols, and we don't want to do that. So you got to play with aeration, temperatures, and just control your temperature during your fermentation. In the beginning of your fermentation, you create more fusel alcohols than esters. At the end, you don't. You get more esters. So play with it. Don't stuck with one temperature, but start cool, ramp it up in the end, and then that's how you play with your ester profile.
Yeah, we've heard that from a few sources on the podcast. People talking about, don't just blow out the temperatures on your Belgians. Start low, and then after a while, let nature take its course. Yeah, definitely. There's plenty of breweries that put cooling onto a tank for about 12 hours, and that's it, or 24 hours, depending on the yeast strain that you use. What other things are you playing with?
Well, we have
barrel aging cellar.
A barrel aging cellar?
We're doing a barrel aging cellar. We're doing some wine. We've done Chardonnay lately, and that's an interesting project. What else, Stephen? You want to talk about the barrel?
The barrel aging.
The barrel.
Well, first, the wine. We're making Chardonnay because for a couple of reasons. It's kind of fun. We got the grapes from Sonoma County, and we've been fermenting it here, and now it's still on oak. And we got some barrels from old Chardonnay winemakers, and it's pretty interesting. It's a clash of winemaker versus brewer, and there's some fire coming out of the room sometimes. So, of course, because of a Chardonnay, you like some butter sometimes in a Chardonnay. So then you get you put it in the lab and you run the diacetyl numbers, and you get the lab guy running in your office like, you got diacetyl in your wine. And like, well, I think it's okay. Let's taste it again. So I think we're on the right track. It's an interesting experiment. And then the other thing that we're doing is we've been making for a couple of years now bourbon aged beers aged in bourbon barrels. And maybe it's time for another drink for you guys. But I can elaborate on that maybe in a minute. How about that?
That sounds good. Yeah, we'll pause here for just a second. Okay, we've got people going in search of other interesting beers, and Mark has a question.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, you got this beautiful new brewery that has just opened, I guess, in just a few months ago, 6 months ago. And with all the extra capacity, has that given you kind of the freedom to experiment a little bit more with these different styles? And this brewery is so high-tech. Have you gotten through the initial training period involved in the brewing process?
Well, there's two answers to your questions. First, it's Craig who gives me the ability to do testing, not the brew house, because that causes more headaches than anything. But having Craig here, and he just walked out, but he's a great help, and he's been streamlining what all I was doing before, so it gives me more time to do some fun stuff. The brew house it's a very nice piece of equipment. It's high tech, and it's the most modern brew house in the U.S. probably for the next coming weeks until somebody else opens a new one. But we're very happy with it. Working the kinks out of it has been not easy because the biggest thing is that these brew houses are made for making lagers, and if you're making a wheat beer or if you're making a pale ale, what are the characteristics of those beers? Just looking at pale ale, you want hop, you want Cascade hops, and you want them, in your nose. So all of a sudden you got a new brew house here, and I don't think there's anybody in Germany anymore who puts in aroma hops anymore. I think they're just all bittering cans, and it's been a little struggle. I think we're getting there. I think we're getting very close to that. There's some other issues that we're still working on, but I think we're getting there. We've actually been brewing since since June last year, so almost a year further, and I've been we need to get this thing dialed in, and it is almost.
Well, speaking of aroma hops, when we walked in to the tasting room, or when I walked in, I was shooting some video outside, and of course the guys abandoned me and went inside into the warm tasting room, and they all had samples of your double IPA in their hands, and I think we all agree that that's some pretty darn good stuff.
Well, thank you. Well, that's another one. Think off the beaten path. Who puts a bittering hop as aroma hop in an IPA? You do? Well, there you go. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ash and Mark and
that's what I like about you guys. You guys are good homebrewers because everybody was like, oh yeah, I'll put my Centennial in or my Cascade but I'm putting I put Zeus in there for dry hopping. And that's kind of what and it's not me who comes up with this. It's the brewers who brew here, and they rub their hands in the hop every day, and they're like, man, this smells great. We should dry hop it. Well, let's do it. Go, and we're doing it, and that's what came out of it. And it's actually, I think it's Zeus all the way. There might be a little bit more of another bittering hop, maybe some Magnum or something in there. I can't remember, but and I think it's just a balance that you want to get out of it. That nice citrusy characteristic of that hop, but then it needs to blend out with the malt. You probably noticed also it's a little darker in color, because I think a lot of these IPAs that I've been trying are like the top, and there's some hop, and it finishes up with hop. Well, you need to have a balance in there. I think you need to get some hop, and then you need to have a little bit of sweet maltness and then dry finish, and not the hop and the sweet finish. That's my take on that, but I might be wrong. Who knows?
So I've made a point, I'm on the quest for good hop aroma in my beers. So everyone that I know who brews good, hoppy beers, I ask them, what's the key, especially in the homebrew environment? What strategy would you recommend for, getting those good hop aromas in something like a double IPA or just a single IPA?
There's only one time a year that you can get good hop aroma. That's the harvest, and that's it. Well, you can, but it's not the same. I don't know if you ever tried our Nutcracker, but we fly in hop from Yakima for that. We pay a ton of money, and I think it's every year. I'm just so happy that we can do that. We hang about 250 pounds in the tank. Talked to Steve Dressler from Sierra Nevada the other day. He goes, it was around hop harvest time, and they truck that in because they're so close to it. And he goes like, man, I saw a bunch of hops sitting there for a brewer somewhere, and he's flying it in. Can you imagine? I said, like, yeah, that's me. He said, yeah, these guys got to be nuts. Yeah. But yeah, we that's kind of what I think is when you have the fresh harvest hop, do some dry hopping with fresh hops. You'll be amazed what you can do with it. But I'm sure you guys do that. Yeah.
So when do you dry hop? When would you recommend that homebrewers, at what point in the process would you dry hop?
After fermentation. Yeah, your yeast during fermentation you get CO2 formation. So it's going to blow out a lot of the characteristics of your hops. Plus also your yeast will reduce some of your IBUs. So the later you do it, the better.
We talked to Matt Brindleson and
Firestone.
Yeah, Firestone Walker and John Mallett of Bell's, and they were talking about dry hopping at the end, just right at the end of primary fermentation when there's still some yeast activity, whereas a lot of people would rack to secondary and then dry hop. What's your opinion along those lines?
I've never tried it. I'll give it a try. I don't know what the impact would be, but I know that Matt is he makes some fantastic beer, so he would know. But we'll give it a try. Usually, what we do is we, especially with hanging those hop flowers in the tank, is you can't do it during fermentation because you have to rack from one tank to another. So basically, what we do is, I guess it's basically the same thing. Is we bung tanks to keep CO2 because we like natural carbonation here. So just before the bung, we basically transfer the beer over. So I guess and there's still some action going on in the tank then. So I guess we're doing it at the same time as they do. Yeah.
So when you say hang the hops, what do you mean?
They're going in stockings, and we hang them from the spray ball in the tank. Well, not from the spray ball. We have a special hook in our tanks to do that. Yeah.
So it's actually in a hop bag in the tanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that mainly for production reasons, for ease of for not getting hop debris in the beer and such as that, or is that a technique that you found that really gets you the best hop aroma?
Well, I'm talking about flower hops. So the flowers, if you put the flowers in like that, they're gonna clog your drain, your outlet. So you have to hook them in somewhere, and we hang them in a bag. We've done some tests with just adding the pellets to the beer also, and that you don't have to put them in a bag for that. You can just throw them in. Yeah, and then I think some guys, and that's what we do too. We put some CO2 to the bottom to keep the yeast back in suspension a couple of days, and then we start racking it out. Yeah.
Interesting. Questions, guys?
I've got one, and it's dealing with whole versus pellet hops, dry hopping. In your opinion, which one gives the better aroma?
Well, I think pellets are getting a lot better nowadays. There's better quality out there, and I think if you want consistency in your beer, you have to go with pellets. Because the flower hop, they kind of lose their edge after a while, and there's nothing you can do about it. So we use pellets also. For the double IPA, we use pellets.
We've got some beers in front of us now. Excuse us while we're distracted. Now, what do we got, Greg?
That's the animal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the some would call it a dark triple or a quadruple. It's what a lot of Americans would call it, quadruple style Belgian ale.
While we sip, Stephen, tell us about the beer.
And I'll drink my water.
I'm sorry.
Well, John and I have been working on a range of new beers. We call them the Big Bottle Series, or there's some other names floating around, but we haven't decided on it yet. So when we were looking at these beers, we looked at, okay, what are we going to get? We like our Saison so much, so that'll go in. And then we like our triple. It has more flowery notes. That needs to go in. And then we kind of were missing a dark beer. And we've been playing around with double. We've played around with some other things. And then we came up with this. And then when we were brewing it, our brewers were, our cellar guys were checking it. And it's like, wow, this is an animal of a beer. So that's where the name comes from.
Wow.
A lot of caramel in this. Yeah. A lot of caramel.
Yeah, at the very end, there's a brown sugar note, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned how you got the name for the animal beer, and that's probably one of the things I think is most fun for a home brewer is, developing a recipe and giving it a name. And usually there's a story behind it. It's always fun to tell. So a lot of Boulevard's names are a reflection of style, but you do have some beers like the new Lunar Ale, and I think there's one called Bob's 47, and I'm just curious what some of the stories are behind those names.
I can tell you the story about Bob's 47. Bob Berkowitz was a brewer at Mulebach. When John started, or an old brewmaster from Mulebach, when John started the brewery in '89, and he helped John out with starting the brewery. Now, 47 stands for the class. He was from class 47 when he graduated from brewing school, and for his graduation, he brewed a Munich style beer. So we, as a how do you call it? My English is tribute. Thank you. A tribute to Bob. We make his recipe, his Bob's 47 is a Munich style lager, and it's been changed quite a bit over the years, of course. But it's been fun. I mean, it's great because he still has a lot of people here in town. Some of his family is still in town, and they're still very anxious to see it coming out, and they just like the tribute. Story goes that Bob really didn't like that beer that much, but in the end we brew it still.
Wow. I almost forgot to turn the mic around. I was paying attention to my beer too much. This is wonderful. I hate to sound like a broken record, but give us some background and some tips on this quote unquote style.
Right. Well, first, yeast. Like I said before, you got to get a yeast that can play with this temperature. I'm sorry, not with this temperature, with this extract level, because you're starting at 20 Plato and you want to finish it off. And talking about yeast, now that we're making wine, we've been playing with wine yeasts, and it's been very interesting with the different wine yeast. And then actually one of these yeasts we use to bottle condition this beer. It's basically champagne yeast that we use for that, and it does a wonderful thing because our other strains can't handle it. Other than that, you want to get it dark, and how do you get it dark? Dark sugar or dark malt, and there's a little bit of everything in here, but the Belgians like dark sugar, and that's what we did too, quite a bit actually. And other than that, I think we used Steering Golding, nice noble hop. Even though the hop is just, what does it do in such a big beer? Not that much, but it makes a difference, I think.
I'm stifled. You've managed to shut me up, Stephen.
I got more to talk about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you just keep talking.
Okay, all right. So we liked this beer, and we thought, wow, this is interesting. Such a big beer. So, and then we have what we've done doing with those barrel aging is we've been putting our porter in there for bourbon aging, and which comes out really nice. Our porter is a good hoppy beer, and it's again falls into these categories between is it a brown porter, is it a robust porter? Well, it isn't one of each. It's a bully porter. It's from Boulevard, and so we thought, okay, why don't we put that beer in bourbon? And then we did that, and we've been tasting it. Craig and I go over there now and then to taste it. See, we got the good jobs too. And then and John was there too, and we tasted it, and we thought, well, this is okay, this is good, but it was like you got the bourbon and then you have the beer. So then we started adding cherries to it, and now I think we got it. We put cherry in there, and cherry is not pronounced, but it's how they call it in French, mariage parfait. It's like a perfect marriage. It goes from the bourbon to the sweetness of the cherries and the tartness it finishes, and then there's malt in there. You see what I'm saying? It's a nice swirl. Nice.
Have you thought of playing with sour beers at all?
Yeah, for a couple seconds. No, we will eventually. This bread that we do is keeps us on our toes. And so what we did is we have an offsite warehouse where we are aging these beers in bourbon, where we make our wine also, and that's where we're going to make some sour beers too eventually. But you gotta, we need time for that, and it's probably least on our list to do, but we eventually will make something. Yep.
Talk about animal. You don't want the animal loose in your brewery. You don't want all these wild beasts.
No, like I said before, we make wheat beer for a living, and we need to keep that for sure. Yeah.
Well, any more questions? We've spent a lot of time and gotten a lot of good information, and a bit of good beer as well. So I can't believe you guys. Ash, you don't have a question?
I'm just drinking the beer.
Well, Stephen.
Well, I just wanted to, as something for you guys to look forward to, is that we're working on what we call a big bottles line. It'll get a name eventually, and it'll be out in September, right, John? And
September, you'll see 4 or 5 different styles of beer, all bigger beers, higher gravity beers, packaged in champagne bottles, 750 milliliter cork and cage closures on them. And we'll have all the things we've talked about today, the Saison Brat, a regular Saison triple, this animal, the quadruple, and a double IPA. So we'll have some more robust beers in that package format in September. So that's new in the form.
Would that cherry bully porter be coming out in that also?
Yeah, it's actually this animal beer with the cherry and bourbon barrel, and yeah, it'll make the lineup. It'll be very limited. The barrel aged stuff is more limited, but you'll see that, yes.
And they'll be coming to Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, you bet. You'll find them in Northwest Arkansas. And then we plan on having, I would say every 2 or 3 months, a new release of something interesting that we do. So you can, go back to the store and find something new all the time. That's the plan.
Well, it just got more fun to work at Boulevard, I guess.
Yeah, it is. This is fun, but we know that what our business is, and I think you also should look forward to Lunar first, and let me know what you think about that. It's not in this category, and that's kind of what probably mistaken by some people, is that it's not in this category of big beers. It's a very drinkable, unfiltered brown ale with a twist, with a Boulevard twist on it, and it's in a hot day, I can see me pounding a couple of those down after mowing my lawn. There'll be a competition between that and Zone, I think. This is the first thing that we'll put on the market, and then later on we'll come with these big beers, which are a lot of fun to make. Yep.
Outstanding. Well, guys, I certainly appreciate your hospitality, and Flops guys, I appreciate your questions, and we look forward to the future.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks again to Stephen for playing sick and coming in to answer our questions, even though he didn't feel like doing it. He was toting around a Kleenex box the whole time we were there. So I appreciate that greatly. I know that he didn't feel like being there, but I sure am glad that he came in. And thanks also to John and Craig and Julie and Ben and everybody at Boulevard in Kansas City for being so hospitable. Also, thanks again to Mike, Mark, Tom, and Ash from Flops, Fayetteville lovers of pure suds, for coming along and helping to ask questions. and give a lot of moral support while we were there. And boy, I'm looking forward to the new beers coming along from Boulevard. Well, next week, I believe I'll start a short series of shows on sanitation. Merle Landman from National Chemicals will join us to talk to us about his take on sanitizing equipment and how to use iodophor properly. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And while you're on our site, you can check out our online shop where you can find great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. In our first DVD, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. And we do that in a non-linear way where you can choose either infusion mashing or step mashing. And then you can choose either fly sparging or batch sparging. And then you can figure out for yourself which you like better. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from us online, and I'll put it in a box myself. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support that way. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Special Topics in Calamity Physics and I Like You, Hospitality Under the Influence by Amy Sedaris. She's a funny gal. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we do appreciate your support. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.